Hello, welcome everybody into the Nets and MMA podcast. This is Andrade along with Manuk Akopian, combat sports journalist. His work featured in the LA Times. Manuk, how are you this afternoon? You're coming straight from the Canelo-Jacobs fight last weekend. How was that?
Oh, it was a fantastic fight. Anytime there's a big fight in combat sports, it's good. And, we have another one coming up with UFC 237. So another fantastic fight week coming up.
Correct. UFC 237 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It's a very interesting 2019 in the UFC, Manuk. I'm looking at, when you look at some of the numbered cards, as they say, UFC 233 was supposed to be the first one in January. Never happened. Got canceled. Got postponed. UFC 234 was the next one, but no title fights in that one. It was Israel Adesanya beating Anderson Silva in the main event because Robert Whittaker had to pull out of that event because of his condition, emergency surgery. So still, we're going to March in UFC 235. John Jones fought Anthony Smith in a lopsided affair. And Kamaru Usman defeated Tyron Woodley to take away the welterweight belt from him. And those are the two only championship fights we've had so far in 2019. Manuk, it's May. It's the first week of May. We're heading into the second week of May. We've only had two title fights so far in the entire year, because UFC 236, there are two interim title fights. Now in 237, we have their third title fight of the year. Hopefully nothing goes wrong and everything goes as scheduled. That rarely ever happens in the UFC these days. But UFC 237 will be headlined by Rose Namajunas and Jessica Andrade, the Brazilian. But first let's talk about another Brazilian on the card, Brazilian legend, UFC legend, one of the greatest of all time. Featherweight bout we have on the main card, Jose Aldo against up-and-comer Alexander Volkanovski. Probably Volkanovski's biggest fight of his career so far. What are you looking at when you look at this fight? And also just everything that I just touched on, how the UFC, we really haven't seen any title fights so far this year.
Yeah, Andre, the UFC got off to a strong start in 2019. Big deal with ESPN Plus. Rolled out a lot of great fights. And then it's been kind of a rocky road ever since, obviously with Conor's retirement and TJ's suspension and the lack of title fights. But frankly, UFC 237, I think it's their strongest card so far. You have two ladies with Rose and Jessica who are flat out brawlers, and we should be in for an exciting fight. And then we have the Brazilian legends with Anderson Silva and Jose Aldo.
Yeah, a lot of Brazilian star power in this card. So Aldo and Volkanovski, featherweight clash. Aldo is a slight favorite on Artshark, minus 135. But Artshark saying 54% of the bets are actually coming in for Volkanovski. So Aldo is the favorite, but the money is coming in slightly towards Volkanovski. Of course, Aldo's only losses coming to Max Holloway and Conor McGregor in huge title fights. So what do you see? Do you think Aldo is coming off back-to-back wins against Renato Moicano and Jeremy Stephens? Do you think he will continue his winning trend against Volkanovski?
Let's be straight shooters here, Andre. Those guys aren't world beaters, and as much of a legend Aldo is, he is on the, as they say, the twilight of his career. And frankly, I think this might be a farewell fight for him, because I think Volkanovski's the stronger fighter, the hungrier fighter, and the one that, although it might be a 50-50 fight, I'm favoring more towards Volkanovski. If I had money, which, it's 2019, it's hard to come by these days, I would put it on Alexander Volkanovski. And sadly, I think this might be the beginning of the end of Jose Aldo's career.
Well, I'm going to have to go the other direction. I'm going with Aldo in this one. What are you talking about, Manuk? Aldo is 32 years old. Everybody keeps talking about how Aldo's so old, this, that. He's 32 years old, and he doesn't have, sure, he doesn't have the belt anymore. Sure, he lost to some of the greatest fighters in the game, in Max Holloway and Conor McGregor. He really came out against Stephens and Moicano and showed that he still has what it takes to compete in the top of the featherweight division, destroyed Stephens in the first-round knockout, and Moicano, who's a really good challenger, beat him in the second round via knockout again. those are solid victories for Aldo. And I think when you look at Volkanovski, sure, he's an up-and-comer. There's a lot to like about this guy with some solid wins against Chad Mendes, Darren Elkins. But you look at Aldo, 92% takedown defense in his career. He's been brought to the floor, to the mat just 6 times over his last 13 UFC fights. And I think this is a big test for Volkanovski. I think Aldo, who has experience, he's going to be in his home country. You haven't even talked about home advantage yet. So I think Aldo takes this one. Again, he's a slight favorite. But I think a lot of people, because of all those losses against Holloway and McGregor, they kind of forgot about him. And, he's going to come out and say, hey, I'm still out here. And he's only 32. Give him a break.
Well, as we know with the golf terminology, he's definitely on the back line. So if he's going to have some Indian summer...
Volkanovski's 30. How come he's not in the back line? Just because he's a shorter UFC career?
Well, he definitely hasn't been in as many wars as Aldo has. And ever since Aldo lost to McGregor, it hasn't been the same. The psyche, the invincibility, the aura that surrounded Aldo has disappeared. He was flat out one of the best to do it until that devastating punch that McGregor landed. And
I don't know, man. It seems like he came out and beat Frankie Edgar after that, and then losing to Max Holloway twice. I mean, whatever. It's Max Holloway. He's one of the greatest featherweights to ever live. This is his fight. This is a winnable fight for Aldo, I think. But let's move on to the next one. Another Brazilian legend. Now, this guy might be in the back end of his career. Definitely towards, maybe this is his farewell fight. Anderson Silva, plus 130 underdog against Jared Cannonier, minus 160 favorite. Cannonier is a guy who fought in the heavyweight class, and he's moved down to the middleweight division. So he's a big dude fighting in the middleweight class. So he's won 7 of his 11 professional wins are via knockout. And Anderson Silva, one win in his last 7 fights. We all know how much of a legend he is. What do you see in this one? Do you think this is a fight that Silva can finally use to get back on track against a guy who's an up-and-comer, but he's not really a huge, big prospect?
Absolutely, Andre. I mean, as nice of a story that Jared has, he's no world beater, and I think Anderson's going to have one last hurrah in him, especially in this having that fight in his hometown. He's coming back after a strong showing against Adesanya, so he gave me enough. He showed me just enough for me not to go against him. I think Anderson's going to win this, but I don't know how many more he has left in him because the competition is only going to get tougher after this.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think this is the end of the road for Silva. I mean, you look at his losses over the last, since 2013, he lost to Chris Weidman, who was at the top of the middleweight division at the time. There's no shame in that. Michael Bisping, no shame in that. Daniel Cormier, absolutely no shame in that. And that was a fight against Cormier at UFC 200. He took 2 or 3 days before the fight because John Jones got suspended for PEDs, and they were looking for a match for an opponent for Cormier. So, and Anderson Silva just came out of nowhere and said, "Yeah, I'll step in." So that was a big deal. And then losing to Israel Adesanya, one of the, there's no shame in that either. So I think Silva, he's the underdog here, but again, he's in his home country, might be his last fight. And this is a guy in Cannonier, maybe this. I don't know if he's going to be able to pull this off. Again, Silva, he's so good at avoiding strikes. He absorbs fewer than 2 significant strikes per minute and makes opponents miss 61% of their strikes. Those are big numbers. I know he's not the same guy as he used to be a decade ago, but I think he's going to take this one. And now let's move towards to the final fight of the night, the main event, the women's strawweight title fight. Rose Namajunas finally back in the octagon. It's been more than a year since she last fought against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. It was her first title defense. It was a rematch of their original, the title fight, which Namajunas won, and then she beat Jędrzejczyk again. And now she's fighting Jessica Andrade. Andrade, this is a woman who is a very great striker. Averages more than 6.5 significant strikes per minute and lands more than half of her strikes, 51%. What do you see in this one between these two feisty women?
Absolutely, Andre. This is obviously Namajunas. She put on two spectacular performances back to back. And when you look at these fighters, for the average fan who might not be into women's MMA, you might look at the record. You have an 8-3 champion versus a 19-6 contender. But make no mistake about it, these two women are absolute maulers and brawlers, and I think we're going to be in for a show, and they might even steal the night. I mean, this entire this show in Brazil, it's obviously they have the two legends on there. Andrade might steal the show, but I'm going with Rose, who I think is going to be the thorn in the side of the Brazilian.
Ah, what a great pun there, Manu. But I disagree with you. I'm going to go with Namajunas. I'm going to go with Andrade, who is actually the slight favorite. It's pretty much a pick-em, to be honest with you, so I can't even really call her a favorite. Last I checked, let's look at the Odds Shark odds right now. Andrade is minus 125 and Rose is minus 105, so they're very close. Most of the money on Odds Shark is going to Andrade. 56% of the bets are going to Jess. I don't know. I look at the significant strike differential. Andrade just averages more significant strikes per minute. You look at the numbers, she has that advantage. She also averages more takedowns per 15 minutes. So she's great on the ground. She's a great striker, and I think she's going to be at home. Her home crowd advantage, and she's also won 6 of her last 7 fights. Andrade has, and her only loss was against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I was talking. There's no shame in that. It's Joanna. It's a big time fighter. So I think we're going to have a new champion in the strawweight division, and that's that. I'm going with all of the home country, all the Brazilians in this one. Going with Aldo, I'm going with Silva, and I'm also going with Andrade. Home octagon advantage.
Well, Andre, like you said, a couple of those fights are 50-50, so I wouldn't be surprised if it goes the other way. The only Brazilian I have winning on this card is Silva, so we should be in for an entertaining night, and then it's been a while since we had that.
No, yeah, I agree with you. That's an exciting thing too, the 50-50 aspect of it. Like if you look at the Vegas odds, they're very close odds for all three of those fights, and that's a good thing when you look at one of the 2 title fights that we had at UFC 235 with John Jones. That was we all knew John Jones was going to win that fight. It was such a lopsided. The odds for that were so lopsided, and the fight was lopsided. But it's good to see some competitive battles here on a numbered card for a title fight. So it'll be exciting to see that. But Manu, thanks again for joining us. UFC 237 on Saturday night, pay-per-view, and we will come back next time. Thank you very much.